Hey friends, I'm Maxwell Freud, a queer Minneapolis-based game designer and the host of Hatch This Way, a limited audio series where I chat with other queer folks in the tabletop industry to learn all about who they are and how they contribute to the hobby by being their authentic selves. And for this episode today, I am joined by my friend and co-designer, Joel Bodkin. Joel, how are you doing? Are you ready?
Wonderful. Can't wait.
So I'll interview you real quick. So I'm the host of the show, but I want people to get a chance to know me a little bit before they commit to listening to all 12 episodes. So I'm going to let you ask me some questions. But before we get into that, so people know who you are, how do you identify?
I've never actually been asked this question, to be perfectly honest.
That's very fair.
It is something that I've walked through life and not really thought about, and especially until the past couple of years. But I've really started to look at... I am a 40-plus-year-old white male who grew up in the Midwest. I have been in a heterosexual relationship since I was 15. I have 2 kids. I didn't realize how many of the privileged majority boxes that I check until I was going through a training. I lead a training at work, and I was going through that, and the only 2 that I don't check from a privileged majority standpoint is I'm agnostic by choice, and I live in an urban setting by choice. I was like, damn, that's a lot of privilege that I was not aware of. And so it's been like, how do I start to do something different with that and be more conscious of it and bring it to the forefront of my mind? So I believe cis is...
Yeah, we sometimes call them cis-hets.
Cis-het, there you go. Perfect.
Or cis-shets, if you kind of put it together.
Okay, cool.
So how did you get into board games?
So I have been playing board games since I was really little. It was the way that my family connected. When honestly, I feel like it was the only time that we ever had conversations, was if there were cards or dice in between us. How I got into it more recently is I started designing games. So I started playing Magic the Gathering with my son, Walt. He wanted to learn how to draft. We started designing games together to teach him how to do that, which eventually became Winter Haven Woods. But I don't know, 5 years ago, stopped drinking and found myself with a lot of time and this budding idea of what if I actually did something with a game that I designed. And so after that, it's just kind of been diving in headfirst into the board game industry. I've always been a fan, but being in it and creating things with people all across the world is fantastically fulfilling and a nice counterpoint to my day job.
What is your day job?
So I am in product design at Target. I currently lead the own brand strategy on the design side. So anything that you buy that is a Target owned brand, I help teams figure out where we should be going in the future as we prepare for all of the change that is ahead of us. But it's taken me away from actually designing products, which is where I invested a lot of time and energy in both school and then throughout my career. And I didn't realize how much I missed it until I started doing it again. And board games is kind of the amalgamation of all the things that I love in one tiny box that you can create an experience that people open and have without you there, but then you get to hear how that experience went and how close you got to the mark and how far off you got. And what I love about it is board games are about spending time together. They're about friendly competition. They're about finding joy with the people in your life that you want to be playing games with. And so though people get really mad about games sometimes, it is one of those things that you can put out into the world that for the most part people really enjoy them. And so it's also a really cool collaborative industry, and I love that about it. So
Yeah, I will say you are definitely not the first straight white man who said, "Hey, I have a game design that's based on Magic the Gathering but slightly different." I've I've met and play tested at least 6 other games from people who said that same thing. I think the difference with you is that you're coming from a creative and professional design background. So you weren't just a person who had an idea and thought, you know what this industry needs? Another straight white guy making a game that's already out there and does very well, which is a valid way to get your foot in the water. I would always recommend people bring something unique to the table. And they probably just don't know that's not a very unique stance. They probably have never had anyone sit down and say, look, there are a lot of straight white men who want to redesign Magic the Gathering to make it accessible or more better in some way. And there's a lot of you. And it's not probably the best way to break into the industry, because that's what they all say is their goal, is to have something go to market and they want to revolutionize it somehow. And you know what? I'm not here to poop on your dreams, but...
No, I completely agree with you. It wasn't until our conversation that I really considered that point of view. Like the first time that we sat down and played both of our games at Lodestone, it was, you asked me a lot of really tough questions about why do I want to do this? And that was not really something that I had considered. I was just like, I want to make a game. But the questions that you asked me got me really thinking about, like, why do I want to do this? And so
I think something that marginalized people have to grapple with, that straight white people don't have to grapple with on a daily basis, is if I do something, I am held to a standard of, because I'm a marginalized person, I become in some ways people's single source of narrative of what that group is like or does or is capable of. So I'm always having this pressure, not just to validate myself and my existence of, am I worthy of putting something out into the world? I'm also having the pressure of, if I do make something, is it worthy of the community? And I have to ask a lot of very hard questions of everything I do, because anything I put out could be taken as it just could have a bigger impact, and I have to be aware of that. And I think I don't have the privilege of just putting something out, and I wish I could think that way. I went to film school, so there's a lot of straight white men who went to film school who just have ideas and like, I just want to make this movie. I'm going to make this film. I don't know why I want to make this film. I think it'll be cool, and I'm just going to do it. Like, that must be really nice that you don't have to worry about how you come across, or just have no pressure. That being said, so I did ask you some questions. So what is your goal? And we also haven't mentioned it. So you have a publishing company. So why did you make a publishing company, and what is your goal behind it?
That's a great question. So I made a publishing company because that's an interesting thing that I've never actually thought about, because I made a publishing company so I didn't have to subject myself to the things that you go through as an individual, and so that I could be making the decisions. I think that what it's evolved into over time is it is less about being in charge of the decisions, because there are a ton of them. It's more about what can I do that is different, that is not about making money. So for me, eventually, maybe I will quit my day job and do this full time, but that's not my goal. My goal is to continue to make games that bring people together, that have something different about them, but are still very accessible, and broaden people's understanding of what a board game can do in your life. I think that they're a fantastic teaching tool. I've used them with my own kids. I think that a lot of people do that. I think that for me, they're a really interesting art form, from the standpoint of yeah, I do all the illustrations, but it's like, it's the whole experience too. And it's, I love when it all comes together and works. And I love the challenges, tough discussions, the iterative working through of all of that to get to that end experience. Because it pushes me to learn new things. It pushes me beyond where I am comfortable saying, hey, I had this idea. I like Magic the Gathering. I'm going to play a game. I'm going to make a game about that. It pushes me past that point to say, okay, there are thousands and thousands of games that get released every year. What is the reason for this game to be? And how do I make sure that it earns that reason to be before I put it out?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, I don't know that I finished it very well, but it's a fine way to start is to make something because you can. I think it's another thing to grow and say, ask all those questions. Why? Why am I doing this? Why does this need to be made? Why does this need to be on someone's shelf? Why do I need to share this with people? What am I bringing to the world? What am I adding by putting this out there? And sometimes if it's just for you, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if you're going out and you want to change the industry or make an impact and you have very big dreams, you're going to have to come from a very real place, and thinking that because you have an idea and the time to do it warrants you being able to have success. I think that's it's a place you might find success actually, and that's, I don't know, unlikely. I think also one thing you mentioned before when we first talked that you haven't yet is I think you also have a pressure of you're a parent. That's something I don't have, but I think, and I don't know if you do this consciously or if it was part of your decision making, is I think it's awesome that you're doing something to show your kids an alternate path to, you have to go to school for something that makes you money, and then that's how you survive. Do you have any other like intentional things behind doing it with your family or trying to be a role model for them in some way?
Yes. So I am a person who learns by doing. I find that I teach better in instances where I can be showing someone how to do something as opposed to telling them how to do something. I started to run into that with my children, and until 2020, I would go in downtown Minneapolis and I would be gone for 9-10 hours a day, and then I would come back and they would ask me about my day, and I was ready to leave my day behind and talk to them about anything else. But it wasn't giving them an understanding of who I am, what I've spent my time investing my 10,000 hours from a skill standpoint, and I wasn't passing it on in any meaningful way. And like that was something that my parents, my grandparents, like just people in my life have always made the time to invest and show me how to do something if I asked. And so this opens up the opportunity for them to ask and say, hey, what are you doing? Or just share with them. Like we were talking about Walt's candy business. It's a different level of interaction, and it is highly visible. So they can hear me talk about it. They can see me doing it, and they can do it with me together. And so in some way, shape, or form, I hope that they take away that, you could go to college if you want to. You could just get a job. You could go explore and make things. Like there are many, many different paths that you could take in life. And I don't have any expectation for them as to like what path it is that they take. It's important for me that they try hard and learn from their mistakes. And those are the only two things that I want them to take away from this. So I discuss when I screw something up, I talk to them about it and like what went wrong and how I would think about doing it differently in the future. And I try and be as open and transparent with anyone that I meet that asks me questions of here's where I went wrong on this. Here's how I would do it again. And I'm going to try it differently in this way. And, everyone has those stories. And it's been amazing how many of other people in the industry doing things that they're passionate about have shared that experience back to me. So, but from a kid's standpoint, yeah, I used to go to craft fairs with my dad, and like he taught me how to do a ton of stuff. My mom taught me how to do so much in regards to drawing. She was always really supportive of anything that I did that was creative. And so just trying to figure out what it is that lights them up before they go out into the world, and I'm there way less. Yeah. I don't need to like dictate what it is that they do, but I would love to understand them more as little people. So that's been a like mental hurdle for me of like, as they're growing up in a very, very different environment than I am. Mm-hmm. What is normal for them, what they experience on a daily basis is very different than what I experienced growing up. And so I don't have any context in that regard. And so for me, it's a lot about keeping the conversation open so that they don't ever feel like they can't talk to me about something. And I learn as much through our conversations as I hope that they do. I probably learn more.
No, for sure. I think you have this weird challenge whenever I talk to you that your children want to spend time with you, which I think is wild. That was never something I was never like, oh, if only I could spend more time with my parents.
Right.
I never had that. I grew up very much alone in a basement or wandering outside. Like I was just alone a lot, and I loved that, and I still thrive in those situations because that's how I was raised. And I think it made me an extremely creative person because I was forced to activate all those creative parts of my brain where I had to entertain myself all the time growing up. So I think it's really cool. I think it's a testament to just you as a person that your children actually want to spend time with you.
Well, thanks. Like you said, though, it is a challenge because, I started this and it was fun and it was novel and new. And then we published Open Ocean, and that was great. And then I said, I'm going to do Winter Haven Woods. And I remember Walt's face, and he was like, oh, really? And I realized that it's because all of this, no matter how much I really enjoy it, and it puts me in contact with people who are as passionate about games and design and creativity as I am, it does take away time with them. And so I have to like consciously think about how much time have I spent with them this week, and was it doing something that I wanted to do, or was it doing something that they wanted to do? And so it's a weird balance.
What's your sense having these conversations with them about queer people and queer identities? I mean, do they talk about it? Are they aware of it?
Oh yeah, definitely aware of it. There are a lot of times where we'll have conversations about someone that they know at school who's going through figuring out their identity. One of the proudest moments that I had as a parent was when Lily and my niece Mia were playing Barbies, and there was only one Ken doll, and then there were 3 Barbie figures, and they were playing wedding, and they were going to like have a joint wedding, and Mia was like, okay, Ken and Barbie are going to get married, and Lily was like, and Barbie are going to get married, and Mia said, 2 girls can't get married, and Lily was like, yeah, they can. And it was just like, I was like, yeah, you're right, they can. And it was interesting because I think that she was like 4. And they've had friends who have not transitioned, but identified female, but were born male. Is that
yeah? We do. So assigned.
Yeah. Okay.
So it'd be like AMAB would be like assigned male at birth.
Yeah. And so we've had friends who've been going through that experience and helping, I'm sorry, trying to get pronouns right, them understand and develop their identity in a way that they want to. And that's been really interesting to watch both their friendships evolve and get closer or drift apart just based on interest, depending. But also being able to have conversations with my friend Danny about Mags going from Micah to Mags and that whole experience. And it's I don't know. It's fascinating conversations because when I'm talking with Danny about it, at one point he was saying, I wish that Mags would exhibit some interest and want to work at something like a sport or an activity. And I was like, have you ever considered that Mags figuring out who they are and how to say that to you and to the rest of the world is that activity? And he was like, never thought of it that way. But it's like living in South Minneapolis, like it's just so many like really interesting conversations. You run into so many like awesome people that will have a conversation with you about it if you don't know. And so watching my kids like have these conversations and like, I mean, they call me out on stuff all the time. We were talking about an ambulance driver, and I defaulted to he pronouns when I was referring to the driver, and they were like, you can't assume that it's a he. You need to use they, them in that instance because you don't know. And I was like, that's completely fair. And I feel like I'm getting much better in that regard, but there are times I still slip up.
Oh yeah. I mean, we all do. You just have to try, it's about intention. And I think if I could give them advice, what you were saying, I don't think finding your identity is an activity. It shouldn't be like a defining thing. I think about finding the thing would be less about what is the activity and more of how can you find the people for them to be around. That would have been, if I were in your shoes, I would say, don't think of it as finding something that they're into. Find people who will support them and ideally someone they can look up to, who they can see themselves becoming, as opposed to like, I did so many things, and as a kid, like as an adult, I have a lot of interests. I could enjoy doing anything as a kid. It came down to who was I spending my time with. Yep. I probably would have enjoyed sports more if there were people who I enjoyed doing those sports with.
Right.
Younger. That's why I probably fell into music and theater, is the people there just made me feel better about myself. And so that's why I found that activity. So that's my advice for parents. I'm not a parent, but as a marginalized person, it's more about I wanted a safe space.
Right.
And I gravitated to wherever I could find that. And I think if you can give someone, especially marginalized people, a role model that they can see themselves, that's probably one of the best gifts you can give to a young, specifically queer person. That's in my perspective.
Right. No, and I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier about I've never had a problem seeing myself in any role or being successful.
I mean, you can walk into any room for the most part, yep, and you have some baseline connection of, hey, dude, tell me about your wife, tell me about your kids. I don't have those conversations with people comfortably. I never do. I can't walk into a room of straight people, straight men especially, and be like, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about most of the time. Unless you're a super nerd, then maybe we can connect on something. But even then, it's like toss up.
Yep. No, I could see that, and that is not something that I've had to deal with except with sports ball because I just
don't
do it. So yeah, that's got to be really challenging.
I mean, I haven't said it specifically, but I will say that is probably a struggle for people when I talk about barriers in other episodes. I think that is one of the barriers is marginalized people can't always walk into a room or a pitch or a meeting or even just at a convention. We can't just walk up to someone and have that, a straight person who is a publisher, head of a company who is putting games out. We can't just walk in and be like, hey, we connect on a very basic level because we have all these similar experiences. We have very different experiences. So the onus isn't on us to figure out how to find that. I think the onus is on the straight person in the position of power to say, am I creating a space when I meet designers who are pitching to me, who are walking up to me at a convention, introducing themselves, where they feel heard and safe and seen, and I'm actually hearing them, and I'm not just defaulting to the people who walk up to me who are very comfortable walking up to me because they're also white and straight and married with kids. Right. If I understand in my head how if that person walked up to you, you'd be like, this is probably the person I want to work with. Give them the choice, because I don't want to step on the toes of the marginalized person. I don't want to. That's a stressful thing. You have to navigate. Now I have to navigate. Am I going to say the wrong thing? They're going to have a lot of opinions. I have to probably pay cultural consultants. But if you don't want to do that work, you're never going to want to sign games by marginalized people if you're not afraid to figure out how to navigate a basic conversation with them.
Right. And if you can't navigate the basic conversation, you can't hope to publish the games and promote the creators that are actually going to make change in the industry. And so we get stuck where we're at because folks aren't willing to make space for that conversation and understand what would make it more comfortable or what context would be really helpful. And just admit that as a publisher, you're probably going to screw up. Everybody does. Apologize for it, make it right, and move on. And do better next time. I feel like that's the only thing that you can do is the world changes too fast now to ever be an expert. You can only develop expertise over time, and the only way to do that is to put yourself out there, make mistakes, learn from them, and continue to do better the next time.
That's a lot of stuff. I think that's a pretty good idea of who you are. And
can I just say that if anybody wants to know more, find me at a convention. I would love to have a conversation about it. I am an open book. I will tell you anything. Just ask.
Are there any other ways people can find your games or connect with you or follow you?
Totally. I'm on all of the social channels. The one that I'm actually most active on is Instagram, or shoot me an email or send me a message through featherstonegames.com. That'll go directly to my email. But yeah,
the benefits of a one-person company.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
You always get that person.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to give you this. I'm handing over the reins to Joel. So the other intention of this episode is to... Joel and I are co-designers on a game, Dino Sitters, which is dropping with this podcast on Kickstarter. And I wanted to introduce Joel so that he could introduce me because I'm hosting the rest of the podcast. And so I wanted him to have an opportunity to ask me questions as a way for listeners to get to know who I am as they're listening to all the rest of the episodes.
And I am going to say that I am really excited for this because we've had some of these conversations. But it's going to be learning for me too. So
I'm very nervous because I'm probably going to put myself or my family on blast, and I don't know how appropriate that is, but hey, you know what? We're going to do it.
Exactly. If you're going to do it,
Yeah.
So here we go. All right. So Maxwell, how do you identify?
I identify as a gay man, white gay man. Yeah, pretty basic. I'm also pretty blasé about, I say he, him. I don't think I actually care that much. I dabble with like drag a little bit. I don't hear he, him and think, yeah, that's me. But it's easy, and it's not something that I feel is super important about who I am as a person. Like, I don't personally, me, very, very personally, me, don't feel like those pronouns are like a huge part of my identity, but I definitely privilege from it. So I definitely identify with it. So I'm not going to say no, because if you see me, you would assume he, him. So, yeah, I'm not going to be like, no, you're wrong. Yeah. And those are, I think, pretty well established, understood pronouns of gay man. So there's a lot of us, for better or worse.
I think for better, but
I mean, in general, we're also notoriously not the most healthy of the umbrella. We tend to be, I think we're probably the most privileged of the queer umbrella. So we're not always the best advocates for even ourselves. That's kind of where I'm getting with that. There are a lot of problematic white gays out there, and yeah, I can't apologize for all of them, but just know that there's some issues, and you're not wrong about it. If you think that some of us are a problem, you're very true. A lot of us had a lot of growing to do, I think. So
what has your journey been like?
Yeah, I grew up in a very small town in the middle of Wisconsin. I'm not an only child. I have 3 other siblings, but I'm 8 years younger than my nearest sibling, so I was very much home alone most of the time, pretty much until I was able to, basically until we could drive, and then we could start seeing each other more regularly, and that wasn't until high school. So up until high school, my parents they still are workaholics. I don't think they will ever truly retire. So they just worked all the time, and I just entertained myself, and I was home alone a lot. And I think I knew at a very young age that I was attracted to men. I definitely knew that. Definitely single digits.
Single digits as far as age?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I was thinking about that in preparation for our conversation, and it was like, I think it was the first memory I have of being attracted to a woman was like 5. And I'm like, I don't know that.
Yeah, I was very young, and I think, like, I used to watch Grease 2 on repeat, and the music, I love Grease 2. I think it was really Maxwell Caulfield that I like saw, and I was like, that person is so beautiful. And I just kept watching the movie because I was so jealous of Michelle Pfeiffer. I just wanted to be her so bad. I wanted to be Cool Rider. I wanted to be on the top of that ladder. It was iconic. So I knew at a very young age. And I just got a very, very clear message from the adults in my life. I think a lot of it was from church, and just, I probably can't name all the specific examples, but it was made very clear to me that being gay was not okay. Like, that was a sickness, and that was not normal, and that I was supposed to have a girlfriend, and that was the path for my life. And so I just conformed to that so hard because I wanted to not do anything wrong or get yelled at or get in trouble. So I follow directions very well. I always have. And that's what they told me to do. And so that's what I did for the longest time. So I always knew, I think my friends and I started struggling with it more in high school, where we were having much tougher conversations. I actually mentioned this in another episode, but I very clearly remember one of my friends who is also gay, we were talking one night, and he was just really struggling, and he said to me, I don't want to die, but I don't want to be alive anymore because I don't know how to be. And that's not something I think we're supposed to be dealing with in high school. And I didn't have probably very healthy ways of helping him through that, because I was also hating myself at the same time, like we all were. And looking back on it now, I think of my friends, 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 of us were queer. We never talked about it or were open about it to each other. Yeah, and there was 80 of us in my graduating class. So the fact that there was like 5 right next to me, and that's just off the top of my head, there's definitely more. I can name, if I think about it, at least double that amount, which is substantial for a very small conservative town.
Yeah.
So very much hated myself, and I internalized a lot of homophobia. And I said, I don't know, I remember in speech class, I did a whole talk about why homosexuality is a choice. And thinking back on it, I could probably, if I could film that interaction, the teacher was great. She was probably standing in the back of the room, rolling her eyes so hard. Because I do not think I was passing as much as I thought I was. And I think she just let me do my thing. And what do you say? You're in a small conservative town. Teachers had been fired and let go for various reasons, like being a person of color or starting the Gay Straight Alliance. So there are definitely strong stances. I mean, the science teacher specifically, who put me to sleep very effectively, staunch views on homosexuality as a sin, and he made that very vocal. And I remember his children became advocates for it too. I don't know where they're at now because they were children, but that was just like understood that was not okay, and it wasn't tolerated in the school, and it wasn't an ideology that they stood for or would perpetuate. So a lot of internalized trauma and hate growing up. And then I remember going to college. I remember my mother looking at me, and she said, if you go to college and become gay, it'll break my heart. And I remember thinking in my head, well, I'm not going to become gay, so I guess I can agree to that. But yeah, that's kind of one of the last things she said to me before I headed out. So I brought that up to her one time, and she said, no, I'd never say that. I said, okay, well, guess we're done here. So I went to college, and then I was a little more free, and I started, fast track to, I eventually met people who are more comfortable being their authentic selves, and queer people and other gay men who were just older and comfortable. And I saw that I didn't have to hate myself so much. And I eventually believed that. After some time, I'm still working on that in a lot of ways, I think. I didn't come out to my parents until I was 25. And it's just I guess I did it via email on Mother's Day, because I didn't want to drive 4 hours back to my hometown to spend time, putting myself back into the closet to go home. I was just tired after 25 years. So I just sent an email instead. I don't know if that's the best way. It's how I did it. Yeah, and I got the reaction of, my mom was like, "Oh, I had no idea. But why would you ever think that anything would change?" And my dad said he kind of knew, but still loved me. And so my biggest fear is that they were going to say, "Well, that's not okay." Like all the ways you think it could go wrong. I thought they were going to suggest are you sure? We could probably do, because I had seen people pray the gay out of people, so I thought they thought that might be an option for me that I was not ready to talk to them about. Just, it would not have gone well had that come up, but it didn't, luckily. I mean, they were outwardly supportive, or superficially supportive. I don't know if superficially is the right word, but they were supportive. I think since then, I don't know. Maybe it's gotten better. I still have moments where I'll go on Facebook and I'll see posts where like my partner's cut out of the picture and it's just me, or I'm in a queer chorus, the Twin Cities Gay Men's chorus, and it'll just be like cropped in on my face and it'll just say Max had a choir concert. So I still think that whole aspect of my identity is kind of pushed down by, I think, pretty much my whole family. We just don't talk about it, really. Oof. Another thing, this is putting people on blast. I remember one Easter I went out to lunch with my parents and my sister's family, and I think one of my nephews asked me if I had a girlfriend, and I was like, no, I have a boyfriend. And he was like, no, you don't. And I was like, what? He was like, what? No, you're joking. And no one said anything. Oh. And then he looked at my sister and said, he's joking, right? And she didn't say anything. And my brother-in-law was like, just stop. And I don't know. I just felt so... That sister specifically is also very like, oh, I love you no matter what, very supportive, like totally fine with it. But then I'm like, you're not telling your children? Like, they were not super little. And I just, like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know if this is like the family that I think people describe as family. Mm-hmm. You know, it might have been where they're at on their journey or whatever. I was just very disappointed in that moment of I didn't feel like I should be a secret to your children if you're so supportive of who I am and love me no matter what, just as long as your children don't know, was kind of the message I got from that. I'm sure she would disagree, but that's just me in the moment, how it felt. So I have a lot of things like that still that I work through. I think now I found a lot of people who I consider my like chosen family that I love spending time with. My partner's family is very open and supportive. I mean, even then, like even as supportive as they are, I remember one time his grandma called and he heard his mom on the phone say, oh yeah, Seth's here with his friend. And then he went out there and said, Mom, you can't say that. And she was like, well, she's of a different generation and all that stuff. But they had a conversation about it and she's like, okay, I'll do better. I understand. And so it wasn't a contentious thing in the end. She was open to having the conversation and doing better. So no one's perfect.
Right.
But I did appreciate that. So just even being in a situation or environment like that meant a lot to me. So I think it's been very healthy for me to find a community like the Twin Cities Gay Men's Chorus was a big part of finding a whole community of people who were just safe and accepting. And if I need something, those people are the ones who are going to call me up. Someone will, whatever happens, they'll be there. I know someone in that organization will come find me and help me if I needed it. So it's not every queer person, I think, gets the opportunity to find that space. And I think it's important that they know those exist out there. Mm-hmm. So board gaming being a hobby community where people have spaces to get together, making sure that you're having a safe space and that you're clearly stating it's a safe space is definitely something that needs to be clearly stated in the community. I think they did it at Gen Con last year where they put up those signs. They said, this is our stance. They had it at the doors, and that some people were like, is this necessary? And yes, it is. You have to say it. Nothing is implied anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I think that the people most often asking that are people who have never needed to experience a safe space, because every place that they enter is a safe space. Being me as a white straight man, like I don't ever have to think about that. And so it's important to put that out there and state it directly, because there's so many places that aren't. And if it's not overt, You just never know. And then it's put on you as an attendee of the con to wonder, is it a safe space? And like that is something that I feel like the board game industry should be taking off the table as a question. And I was glad when Gen Con had that out there. I feel like I don't know if it was Origins did the same thing. I don't remember, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I saw a meme probably a few years ago now, but some of you have never, that meme, and the one that I read that resonated with me is some of you have never walked down the street and been yelled a slur by someone driving a car. And I was like, absolutely know what that feels like. And some people do not. Like, it's wild that people will just scream slurs at you as they're driving by. It's a thing. Because I was holding the hand of my partner as we were walking. And someone drove by and said, faggot. Just drove away. And yeah, that's why we have to navigate spaces and why it's important to know that it's a safe space. You can't just imply it. I thought outside was safe and it's not.
From that standpoint, besides publicly displaying it, like what are other things that game stores, conventions, publishers can do to create that space?
I mean, I think one of the things I'd like to see the most is just hire queer people, which I do see a lot of. I love walking into a store and seeing someone who, in some way, shape, or form, I can get a sense that they're queer or visibly is queer, or that I know is queer because it's a very small community. Just having people there who I identify with is the easiest way, is just to hire marginalized people. If you want marginalized people to come to your store, have someone who works there who looks like them or identifies the same as them. That would be the easiest thing you can do. That's probably goes further than saying this is a safe place is, we actually also employ people of marginalized identities, people of color, queer people, because that says we actually put our money where our mouth is. So honestly, beyond that, I don't know. I think, and then, okay, I'll take it one step further. If you do hire those people, listen to them and then ask them what they think, because they know your store better than I do, what they think you can be doing to make it safer or improve things or make a step in the right direction, and then listen to them and do it would be the last part of that. Honestly, yeah, find people who are marginalized, get them on your team, and listen to them. Or put them in positions of power to make their own decisions. One of my good friends, she's queer, and she manages 2 of the local game stores, and I always feel safe walking into those stores. Just knowing that she's making decisions, she's hiring people, she's organizing events. I know anything I do there is going to be a safe environment.
I think that that's hugely important. I'm glad you said that, of putting them in charge of the decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are lots of instances in life where I've run into someone being hired because they come from a different lived experience in hopes of improving the experience in a store environment or whatever it is, a work setting. But then they constantly have to justify themselves or feel like they always have to defend their decisions when they were hired for their lived experience. Why is it constantly questioned? Like, that's one thing that I'll never really understand. But hiring someone and giving them the ability to make those decisions is awesome advice.
Yeah. That's cool. Best I got.
I love it. Anything else about your journey that you want to touch on?
No, I mean, as far as my personal journey, that's kind of where I'm at. Like I said, still a process of, I think, learning to love myself. Still in the process of that, like truly being comfortable with myself. I was just in a community theater production, and 2 of my friends came and they had like shared a kiss. I don't think they could see that we were like in a room with windows so the kids could like see them kissing. But then it wasn't a big deal, but one of the boys, like, it was a big deal. And he was like, oh my God, those two guys just kissed. And he said that to me, and I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to, I don't know. I don't want to offend a parent by saying something to a kid. Like, it was at a church also.
Sure.
There was no reason for me to feel like I couldn't say something, but I didn't know what to do. That child like stopped me in my tracks by being so fixated on two guys having a kiss within eyesight. But then one of the other adults in the show stepped in, and he said, well, what's wrong with that? It's just a kiss. And I appreciate that. But yeah, I don't know how to navigate children or I don't know. I could probably handle any other, like, a malicious thing. If someone like said something to me maliciously, I could probably stand up to them. But a child being like, oh my gosh, what is that? I'm like, oh God, what do I do? I don't know.
Well, I find that interesting because you're so good with kids. Like when we were filming the Open Ocean video with Lily, it's like I've never seen her light up as much as she did when you were like helping her figure out what to say or how to express herself. And so it's interesting to me that when asked about your identity in some way, or when asked about, or when there's a question.
It wasn't a question though. It was,
right.
Oh my God, did you see this?
Yeah.
And I suddenly, so kids are like amazing little people to me with like tons of potential. That's why I think they're the coolest. And I think they like me because I treat them like a human. I don't know that they're not adults, so I treat them like adults. I think they like that.
Yep.
I don't talk to them childlike. I don't know how to speak child. I only know how to speak adult, so I talk to them like adults, and I assume that they can understand anything I say to them, and I think they just like that sometimes. Anyway, but this kid specifically, he was a great kid. So I think I was just taken aback that I didn't realize he might have these like learned biases, and I didn't know how to handle that because in a way I like look up to the kids also. Yeah, it was a weird situation.
Well, and it could be he just never experienced it before.
Yeah,
like actually seeing two men kiss, like he could have not seen it before in whatever he's exposed to. But I agree with you, like treating children like small sponge-like adults when you're saying your kids like hanging out with you, like I'm with you. I don't know how to treat kids like kids. I know how to make space. I know how to make them feel safe. I know how to earn and give trust, but I don't feel the need to not tell them what I believe to be true and present them the choices that they can make for themselves of how to react to something. Like I just try and answer as many questions, and I think you're fantastic at that from the standpoint of helping kids really understand and kind of grow in that way. You don't give yourself enough credit.
I just assume, I'm like, oh, I give them the assumption that they can do anything. So I never want to be the person who says you can't do this. I don't want to be that person in your life who said, because I don't know where it comes from, but at some point I think children can get deflated when they try to make something or try something or do something and it's not the best because they are children and they've never probably done this thing before and it wasn't great first try. And suddenly we learn the phrase, I'm not creative. I'm not an artist. I'm not something. And you can be if you want to be. Like if you love something enough, you can do it. I very firmly believe that. Some people are naturally gifted. Aside from that, I just hate the phrase, I can't be something. It's a very sad thing for me to hear, especially out of children.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So did you ever hear that growing up, that you couldn't be something? Like, where does that desire stem from?
No, I don't think so. I think that was maybe one thing that my parents did instill in me is that I could do anything. And that's how I think still approach life, is like, if I just figure it out, I can do it. And I'm a very quick, intuitive learner, so I can probably figure something out. If I want to do something well, I will figure out how to do it, and I don't tell myself that I can't. And it's just served me really well in all my different interests and hobbies, of which there are many. I just go in with mentality, if I can do this, and I figure it out every time, more or less. Sometimes it takes some work, and that's fine. I understand that. But some people just go in with the mindset of, I can't do this. And that's as far as they get.
Yep. And back to a point from earlier in our conversation, being able to see other people who identify the same way that you do in positions where they have been successful is, I feel like, hugely important for children to be able to answer that question themselves. And when they start to doubt themselves, being able to see someone who is gay and making like amazing games in the board game industry, they're like, oh, I can do that too. Seeing, like, being able to see yourself in what you aspire to, I feel like is hugely important.
Yeah, that's probably a decent transition to like why I did game design specifically, is I do want to try and be a person that people can say, hey, that is a very clearly gay person who is doing some cool stuff and is finding success. So if I can give someone, even if they're not kids necessarily, if I can at least be present or push the needle in some way or encourage more people to do it, that is definitely one of my goals.
So we're talking about what got you into game design and what is important to you as a designer.
I mean, what got me into game design specifically, and I said this briefly in another episode.
Okay.
Common phrase I use now because I did 12 of these. But to go in more detail, I was at Gen Con in 2018. It was my first convention, I think, of my life, really. I had gone to some sports shows with my parents because they would have advertising booths there.
Oh, okay.
They would sell hunting. They're in real estate, so they would sell hunting land.
Got it.
To or fishing or whatever to people. So this is my first my adult convention of something I wanted to go to. So it was so fun. I went with a bunch of other gay friends from the Twin Cities, and we drove up, and overall it was a great time. And I also met up with one of my best friends there who is straight. But I had this really interesting encounter where my friend and I were getting a demo at a booth on the main floor, and the lady went through how to play the game, and then at the end she was holding out these items, and she was showing us these other items that we didn't get to play with in the game. And I looked at one that said can only be equipped by female characters, and it was like this metal bikini thing. And I was like, why does this card say that? And she's like, well, because that wouldn't be comfortable for a male character to wear. And we just looked at each other like, what? And then I think she sent something. She was like, oh, don't worry though, there are also items that can only be equipped by male characters, so it's equal. And my friend and I just looked at each other. We had this moment in silence, and we just in unison put down the cards, and we said thank you, bye, and walked away. And it just had a moment of silence to process this unintentionally homophobic interaction we just had. It wasn't expected. When you're having a great time and you're just living your best life, and then just to have a little microaggression like that, which happens to every marginalized person, is just my head wasn't there. So after that point though, it forced me to start looking at my surroundings, and I'm like, where do I see myself in these games, and where do I see myself in the crowds? And they do have the Tabletop Gamers does distribute those gamer and ally badges. So I could see that there were queer people around me, but when I was looking at the games and the booths, I really didn't actually see myself in the games or on that convention floor. I was like, where? I have to like seek out the queer people, and they're hard to find. It's like, where's Waldo of gayness? And I just thought, you know what? I have more than enough transferable skills to do this. I'm a filmmaker, designer, animator, professional creative. I do this for a living. I can absolutely figure out experiential game design. Like, that's not a huge hurdle for me. So I was like, I could complain or I could do something about it. So the next step was on the ride home, I started just talking to my friends about ideas. And I was like, I'm going to come up with a game. I'm going to put it out there. And I'm just going to, less so about the game itself, but I want to start having conversations with publishers about, I want to approach them. I want a platform of, let's talk about inclusion when I do these pitches or I get meetings. I want them to know that I'm advocating for inclusion, and I want to hear their responses to it. And I want to have that conversation more so than I wanted to have like a great game. Like,
Right.
Obviously, the game has to be good. I knew I had to make a product that people wanted to buy and have. I can't just make a product, hey, I'm gay, buy this. I could sell stuff that way. That's not a sustainable business model, I don't think. So I knew it had to be good. So I was going to put in the work to make a good game. But then I wanted to also make sure I was doing things to move the conversation forward. That was my bigger goal. That was more of the game was the side project to me getting in front of publishers and trying to have them listen to how they could be better and how I could see myself in their games on the shelves at these conventions. So that's how I got into it. And then I just worked on it for a few years, and I think it's finally starting to come to fruition where I was able to sign a game, and then we decided to co-design a game, and we're getting it out there. And yeah, so I'm super excited to hopefully start building up that presence where people know who I am and they will listen to me, and I can hopefully be a good advocate for the queer community that I want to be. Yeah, it's a hobby that I care about, so I want to make a difference in the areas that I can.
So you're making a difference through game design and the conversations with publishers, other designers about the industry in total. So then why a podcast?
Well, for us, we made this Dinosaurs game, which is really fun. The theme came from me wanting to see you draw cute dinosaurs. That was literally the rest of the rules came after that.
And for me, like, my interest in it was when you said you wanted to be able to play a game with your mom, and you didn't feel as though the first game that you designed would be something that she would be able to grasp.
Yeah, the first game I designed, I'm really excited for.
Oh, so good.
But it's a little more midweight. If you're not familiar with like asymmetric rules and how your asymmetric abilities will play together, and you're not into that kind of dynamic, it's not a gateway game for sure. So I wanted something when they're like, oh, you're designing games now, we want to play them. I wanted it to be a good experience and not, oh, you're designing these games, why?
Yep.
So if they could have a good time, then I know they would be like, yes, this is a good endeavor for you to do things. I don't know why I don't need their approval, but I didn't want them to, I don't know, be turned off by me trying this thing out. I just didn't need that on top of anything else.
Yep.
And also, I just think it'd be fun to have something I could bring out casually with people who are non-gamers. So I did want a game that I could throw out there and have a good time with people who don't play a lot of games. But the podcast came out because there are no people in the game. So one of my big things is I do want representation of marginalized groups, people of color, queer people, disabled people. Like, I want them to see themselves respectfully represented in more games. My first game is, I will not compromise on the amount of visible characters we have in the game. That's like my core design in that game. So Dinosaur just has no people. And I was like, I will be a queer designer. I will make sure I'm like noted as queer on the game, and I will put myself out there. But on top of that, I didn't think just making a fun game was enough to move the conversation. So the podcast was my way of, if I'm going to make a game without people, I want to still uplift people in some way. And a podcast was a really easy way for me to reach out to other queer folks in the industry and say, how can I help tell your story to a larger audience that we're going to have for this campaign? Like, they're captivated, they've invested money, theoretically. And this is a great way to push the content out. And it's going to be June, it's Pride, it's just a lot of queer energy coming together. So yeah, this was me. It was my way of lifting queer voices up, even though there aren't any humans represented in the game other than myself as the designer, which is a name on a box.
Which is still really cool, though. Like, I'm really excited to be putting the pride flag on the front of the box so that people like see themselves and see you as a gay designer on the front of the box, like as they pick it up. Like, to me, that's really cool from the standpoint of being able to inspire others and making sure that it's very visible. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's one of those design things where it's a little design touch that means nothing to a majority of people, but to some people it'll mean everything. So I don't know why you wouldn't do that.
Right.
Is how I rationalize that choice.
No, I completely agree, and I hope that other publishers start doing that more and more. I think that it's important as we talk about all of the like you said, it's an indirect indication that some people may miss, but for the people that it means something to, it will mean the world to.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a publisher and you don't have a game in your catalog that you can feature for whether it's Black History Month or Pride Month, if you can't represent marginalized voices in your catalog, you should consider changing whatever you're doing that is preventing marginalized voices from being included in your games. I think Board Game Geek did a really good job during Black History Month last year, year before. I can't remember specifically, but they just, by no pressure or publicity, whatever, it was not, from what we could tell, it just kind of, Beyonce dropped overnight, came out of nowhere. They're like, here is our series. We're going to spend this month lifting up Black people in the industry, and we're going to give them a platform. And that might have been a seed of like kind of what also fed into this, is like, hey, I can just, if I can showcase other queer people in the industry while I have a platform, what a great way to use that platform.
Agreed. What's next?
What's next? I don't know. Hopefully this goes really well. Haven't really thought about it. I don't plan that far ahead in general. Like, in life, I don't.
Agreed. I feel like we're similar in that way, for sure.
I would love to keep designing. I love collaborating. So, and I think it happens to a lot of people where they see you, if you put yourself out there like, hey, I'd love to collaborate. And I don't know if that's annoying, but I would love to keep collaborating with other designers. I think it takes a lot of the pressure of trying to come up with something on your own and make it good. And I collaborate professionally. Nothing I make is strictly comes out of my head. So that expectation is weird to me, and I don't really like that process or trust it. So I think I have one other game that I'd love to finish designing with some friends. And then I would love to just keep making games with people who are cool and want to reach out and make games. And hopefully it'd be great if they did well. And I just want to be visible for people who need to see themselves in the industry. If they can, there are other designers. I think Isaac Vega and Nikki Valens are two people that, for me, were examples of, hey, these are people who are doing it. They're doing it well. People love them. They make amazing games. People don't always, I think, realize that they're queer. So, not to their fault. Like, I didn't know Isaac Vega was queer for the longest time.
Right.
I think it showed up when he did an interview I heard, and I was like, oh my God. And then I needed all of his games. And they're good games. It's just an added benefit.
Yep.
So I want to be Isaac Vega. And yeah, I just want to be another visibly queer person that people can look to as an example of, hey, you can do it. That's really my goal for this. And I have a lot of other creative endeavors because probably not as much as some people when they're like, I have so many ideas. And like, I have a couple ideas, but they're really big ideas. Like I want to, I'm currently working on creating a theater company to change the way people approach community theater productions specifically and the audition process. I don't think it's equitable. I don't think it's inclusive. It's not accessible. And no one is actually making safe space to tell the stories that I want to see on stage. And more often than not, queer stories are, in my mind, ironically cut from shows or hidden or rewritten or downplayed to the point of non-existence. So
Specifically in community theater plays?
Oh, yeah. I mean, community theaters, if you think about it, they're run by boards of parents. And you need to, like a school board, try to appease as many people in a community as possible. A lot of community theaters are in these rural, on the suburban areas outside of the main hub.
Like a major metropolitan area?
Yeah, like a metropolitan area. Those have like the professional theaters, the paid opportunities for people who have professional experience, maybe your equity. And then if you're just a person who likes doing community theater, you're auditioning in these suburban areas or smaller towns 20 to 30 minutes away from the metropolitan area. So the last audition I went to was for Shrek the Musical, which I've auditioned for. This was my third time auditioning for the show over the course of, 10 years now. And
3 times for Shrek?
Yeah, I can't get into it. So audition was normal. One thing, in case people aren't aware, so here's auditions for, I guess, community theater go. I've never professionally auditioned. So community theater auditions are like this. You go in, you cannot sing a song from the show itself. That is bad. They want you to sing a song from something else to see how you interpret singing a song from the show. And it can't be Sondheim because that's too hard to play for an accompanist, which every accompanist I know knows how to play Sondheim. But regardless, that's the first thing I think is nonsense. And theater people right now are like, yeah, that's how it's done. I guess I'm not really a theater person because I don't understand why you wouldn't just, if you want to see me in a part, just have me sing that part.
Right. Exactly.
I feel like they're going to have me come back. If they like your voice, they'll have you come back to callbacks and do that anyway. So why not just skip that process? I might be ignorant. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, so if you pick the right song that you interpret to sing for the other role that you're going for, and they make the connection and they see you as a good fit, despite you not singing from the show, they will call you back, and then you come back later to actually sing or read from the show. The last one I went to, they did not have me read from the show. They instead had us do improv. So it's a scripted show. There is no improv in the show.
Right.
Like, I've done Tony and Tina's Wedding, which is entirely improvised. This is not that. So they were like, we want you, I'm going to give you some prompts. I had to recite a nursery rhyme and then do that nursery rhyme in like a bunch of different voices that they just threw at me. And they asked me a bunch of questions that I had to answer. Like an example was like, what's the worst planet? And I was like, fitness. And they were not ready for that. And they said, what's your second favorite food? And I said, uneaten.
And could they appreciate the
they were not people were not
amused,
ready for that. They laughed. They were amused, but they were like, oh, that was not what people were saying.
Okay.
So I thought I was genius.
Exactly.
And then after that, they did the nursery rhyme thing. So we had to say nursery rhyme. Then they would throw out things like mine were, you are the carriage driving Snow White, driving Cinderella home, and it turns midnight. And I had to do the nursery rhyme as a pumpkin carriage. And I was like, I don't know what you mean. And then the one after that was, do the nursery rhyme as a person who's possessed by 3 different ghosts. And I was like, you want me to, on the spot, come up with a way to perform 4 different people. It did not go well. I was like, I can say things, they were not good. And I was like, this is a scripted show. I signed up for a part. I wanted to play Pinocchio. That was the only part. Who, in my mind, he's very queer coded, and I wanted to make sure it was a queer person playing that part. He has a line that is, I'm wood, I'm good, get used to it. I'm like, if you're going to say that, it needs to be a queer person, in my opinion.
Yep.
Not everyone is of that opinion. Because theater is like, well, you're playing someone else. I was like, yeah, but I will not go out of principle, and this is just me, to a show if a queer person is played by a straight person anymore. There are enough queer people out there that you can just cast them. Give it authenticity. I was always cast as like romantic leads. I've always been cast as romantic leads. That's another thing that I'm doing after I turn 30. I was like, I am not going to play straight anymore, at least not for a while. I want to, in the same way I'm doing game design, I want to go out and I want to start the conversation of, why can't I play a gay person? Why are there no roles for me to just be myself on stage, or be why can't I play a different queer character? I'm not seeing those roles, and the roles that are queer coded, even if they're not explicitly queer, are not being filled by queer people either.
Right.
So that's the conversation I want to start having in the Twin Cities. And I don't know, I don't expect to like change the entire industry, but I do hope to plant a seed of, hey, what if we did an audition where we sent out the sections of the songs from the show we want you to sing beforehand? And the creative idea is that if you can come in and you can sing that part or perform that part, whatever, if you can bring something to that role, you are considered. It's a name and like a vocal range or anything else that's specific to that part. It does not include age. It does not include gender. And also it wouldn't necessarily, like, singing could be interpretative. If you are a person who doesn't speak and you came in and you wanted to do that role and you could sing it. Yeah, absolutely. We'll like double cast or whatever. We'll use subtitles. Like, we'll make it work.
Yeah.
What if you just didn't go in with an idea of what the show is? What if you casted it based on who came in and did something incredible and then designed your show around those people? Is what I want to try and do. And I want to see, fingers crossed that it makes a splash is my goal. So that's another project I'm working on. A very big project. I don't have a lot of ideas, but I have things like that.
That's awesome, though. I think that is, I don't know, love a lot of things about you, but that is one of them, is the serial creativity. Like, we both do it in our careers, and then that is what we seek outside of our careers as well. And like building a community around that full of vibrant, interesting people has been just like so amazing to be a part of your community, from the standpoint of, you're way more connected in the game design industry than I am as a publisher. Like, if I'm being perfectly honest, and we can cut this, we don't need to, but it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I love working together because you are wildly creative and we both don't get married to the idea. And it's never a, well, things are done this way. I hate conversations like that. I make it a point to try and never do something the same way twice. So when somebody says that's the way that things are done, there is no more surefire way to get the opposite response from me than to tell me that.
Yeah, same.
And so I love that you're going out to start a theater company that is the counter to that argument. And because you're right, if people don't stop and think about who is it that's saying things are always done this way, questioning it and then committing to do it a different way, even if it's not the way that it's always been done, you might be surprised at how much changes if people stop doing things the way that they've always been done. And so I'm excited for that, for whatever comes from you, us, like in general.
Yeah, I think my impetus for both, like with, game design where I'm on the floor and I have this weird othering experience, or if I'm in an audition room, in that case, I felt so unprepared. And then on top of that, they're like, oh, bring your tap shoes. And I was like, what? I do not tap. Does everyone tap? And everyone apparently does. All these children had tap. I was also by far very old in this audition room. For the people called back for this part, they all could tap apparently. And I felt so small, not knowing what I was getting into. And I've auditioned for a substantial amount of community theater shows, and I still felt like I did not belong there. Ironically, I don't know. I'm like, this is not accessible. I don't feel good about myself, and I don't want to come back here. I felt horrible. And I think I just don't want people to feel that way when they do something, when they go to some place that they should be excited about and feel joy, and end up leaving feeling the opposite. So whenever I encounter that, I want to change it. And those are two examples of if someone has a weird experience at a gaming event, how can we change it so no one feels that way? And if I'm having a horrible, like, auditions are horrible. You have to put yourself out there, and you're like, do you like me? And you can prepare. You could work your ass off for these roles and be like, no, because you don't look the way they thought they wanted the part to look like. I've seen amazingly talented people not get cast because they did not look the way they thought it should look. And I'm like, no one should feel that way for how talented and how much work I could tell they put into what they're passionate about. Yeah, that's not right. That's not how this should run. That's not healthy.
No, agreed. Especially if somebody is excited and has invested the time, energy, and built up the expertise to do something creative. Like, so often, like, we just tear people down and make it into a comparative, whereas, in some cases you do have to make comparisons, but we kill so much of the joy of creativity by making people do that, making people uncomfortable in situations, tearing down people's creative efforts through critique. Yes. Do I believe that critique makes you better? I do. Do I believe that there is a better way to do creative critiques? I do. Go ahead.
Maybe not even critique. I think critique is great. I love critiques. I think there's a place for it. Right. I think a lot of these instances, it's not really critiques. It's exercised privilege or abuse of power. Mm-hmm. In some of these instances, yep. It's creating a dynamic where you feel that you have to judge what is good and bad. Yep. And as a director of a show, or if you're as a person in leadership, you might think that's your job, is to say, I'm going to decide what's good and what's bad. And really, it's it's for you to listen and then choose the best course of action based on what you're hearing, or to lift other people up. I think people just think they have to be the ultimate source of right or wrong, yes and no, and really you just have to be open. Like, I don't know. That's how I feel these organizations get to where they are, is they just have people who aren't super secure in not having control or listening or having to navigate relationships with people who also want to have conversations and be involved, and they're uncomfortable, like marginalized people who are saying, I don't feel comfortable in your community, in this organization, at this convention, in your company, and your choice is to say, well, that's how we are, so take it or leave it. You could just be better. Yeah, empathetic. I I don't know if I'm being very gracious with these terms, but
No, I know exactly.
I'm also
what you're
very,
saying,
very tired gay man.
I can imagine. So, talked a lot about a ton of stuff. Who do you hope listens to and finds something wonderful in this podcast?
I think there are like 3 groups in my head who I hope hear this podcast. One would be the straight, hetero, white people who just don't have a queer person they can talk to. We are a minority, so, you probably know someone who is queer, but maybe you're not on super personal terms. And also there's a lot of different identities. So even though you know a queer person, it doesn't mean you know everything about queer people suddenly. So I hope that it gives you an insight. It opens your mind. It gives you some language just to understand how we identify. I hope it demystifies the ambiguity around some of the terms that are evolving. They're still changing, and that's fine. You don't have to be an expert. You can always, if you're unsure, when you meet someone and they tell you how they identify and you're not sure what that means, instead of just nodding and saying, oh, okay, you can ask. And that's a great way to just understand people and not be afraid of them, and just be empathetic to people's journeys and just understanding it's a journey, and we don't have to have the same journey. They're all valid. We don't, even though our journeys are different, some of them are very unique, and that's totally fine. That's just who that person is, and we're not trying to push it on you or tell you that that's the way you need to live. We're just asking that you see us where we're at and, just let us be. That's really what I want for that group. I think another group would be, if you're a queer person listening, one of my biggest regrets is that I couldn't make this an infinite amount of episodes, because I think there's an infinite amount of stories to tell, and there are so many more queer people in the industry who I would love to get a hold of and feature, but I only have so much time. So I do hope you feel seen, maybe a little less alone, knowing that we're out there, we're all trying for the same thing, we're experiencing the same thing, and we all still love games. And there's a community if you look for it and reach out, and you can find a safe space if you need to find one. I think the last one is the group of people who are somewhere in between, where maybe you've never had the language for it, or you're just not sure, and that's also totally valid. Maybe you heard something in one of these episodes that you had never considered before, or resonated with you on a level that you didn't know resonated with you before. And let me say, I got these people to talk to me by just reaching out to them. I'm sure if you wanted to follow up and learn more about an identity, you can obviously Google it. Luckily, there's a lot of resources now, but also if you need to talk to a person, you can probably reach out to these people and find someone to talk to ask more questions about and learn more about your journey. And you don't need to know right away. I hope you realize that as you're listening to it, we're all in different places, and that's okay. So if you're unsure, that it's okay to start thinking other ways and not be so afraid, and know that if you do start your journey of self-discovery and it's different from what you had thought, that there are people out there who will understand you, people going along the same journey. You don't have to be young. You can be much older. My brother is going on his journey suddenly at age 40, decided to change how he presents, and his whole journey and identity with gender has changed very suddenly. And yeah, I'm super excited because, he was very unhappy for really his entire life. And so finally getting the chance to live his authentic self is really exciting. I hope we have not been close. So I'm hopeful that it brings us closer together. Now that I can actually get to know him. I don't know if it'll happen, but it's an option now in a way that I never would have been able to really know him before. And that's totally fine. You know, everyone, it's different for everyone. So don't be afraid to start your journey. And I think if you talk to any queer person, the best piece of advice they would give you is just, they probably regretted waiting as long as they did. If anyone did, if they did wait, that's their regret, is they didn't explore it sooner or say it sooner. Aside from that, if I can just make someone's day a little brighter, if I can make someone listening feel a little safer in the world, yeah, I think that's worth it. Yeah, thank you for interviewing me, taking over hosting duties for this episode 0. I hope everything we discussed makes people interested in the rest of the series. I will be interviewing other queer people from here on out. And I've had the most amazing time getting to meet all these incredible people and hear their stories and journeys. And I'm really excited for people to also hear them and get to know them and just follow all the amazing things that they're doing in the industry. As a disclaimer, I just want to remind everyone that I am just one queer person. I do not speak for the entire LGBTQI+ community, nor am I trying to. The best way to be an ally is just to keep learning, listening, and remember that we're all just trying to get through this together. That is all I have. If you're listening, know that you are loved and perfect just the way you are. And till next time.